thank you so much for gracing us with your presence.
Thank you, JJ.
Let's get straight into it. Prof, what do you make, we'll come to the substance of the State of the Nation, but what do you make of the theatrics, right, that have now morphed into a debate about the clerk, and then a debate about gender-based violence, and then counter-accusations, and then the decorum of the House? Sum it up for me. Anything new there, and anything that the nation should worry about, just from the optics of it all?
Yeah, JJ, I think there is something the nation should worry about. And what the nation should worry about is that we take incredibly, or the political class, across the board, takes major issues which are extremely important for this country, and they turn them into political point-scoring exercises. I mean, violence against women is a huge problem. You know, one of the things I find odd is that we spent a week talking about how apartheid was a crime against humanity, as though all vestiges of apartheid no longer exist. It's something about history. It's not about history. There is so much apartheid thinking and so much apartheid behavior which is happening as we speak tonight, and we're not debating that. And quite frankly, with the greatest respect, I don't think F.W. de Klerk really has anything very interesting to say in that debate. Okay, it's quite clear where he stands on the issue. The point is that those of us who actually believe in a South Africa which is for all South Africans really need to start discussing how we start dealing with these problems. And one of the problems we have to start dealing with is the fact that, as I say, I mean, I've just submitted a book which I hope will be published next week, which is arguing that a lot of the basic patterns and structures of apartheid are still with us. So the crime against humanity is still continuing today.
Just before I get to your view, just Prof, right there, is that not the nub of the issue? That issues that we thought have been resolved, in fact, it appears they've been swept firmly under the carpet.
Yes, no, that's entirely true. And you see, we get into the substance at the moment, but I think that what worries me about this is that the President's response to this at the moment is to talk about social compacts. And the problem about talking about social compacts is that it assumes that we're all on the same page, we all agree what needs to be done, and now we must just agree to go out and do it. The point is that we're a very divided society. We're a society, and precisely because of the point you've just made, because we swept a whole lot of stuff under the carpet. We decided in 1995 that the question of race, which is the most serious question facing this country, was a problem for the bishop and his assistant, Archbishop Tutu and Bishop Moraine, and we outsourced 300 years of racial oppression to 2 clergymen, and then we only started talking about it a few years ago when people started reminding us that we haven't dealt with that.
But clearly, it's clear that we also haven't dealt with the economic issues, because all of these things can be symptoms of frustration, right? That this settlement, right, or what we call the dividend of freedom, hasn't flowed, right, to the most vulnerable. Did the deterrent thing for you almost bring up the question that says we still have a long way to go? Did it put the reconciliation project, issues of social cohesion, in reverse gear?
Look, I think, JJ, that the de Klerk debate and also de Klerk's comments, actually all that they did, they actually showed their underlying attitudes, and attitudes that still exist, particularly on the side of white South Africans who actually do not actually believe that they actually do not believe that apartheid was a crime against humanity. So it's not just de Klerk's view. There's a wider view out there. But also, I think it also talks to the feeling out there now, communities and particularly the unemployed youth. If you look at how I characterize it, I look at what is happening. For instance, the violent nature of protests. You saw at University of KwaZulu-Natal. You saw what happens you see what happens in communities where young people thrash public facilities. And we always ask ourselves this question: what is it that makes them do it? Is it because they do not? Is it because they are they are a lawless bunch? I think it goes beyond the fact that there's criminality and also there's vandalism, but it goes to the fact that there is such desperation and despondency due to unemployment and all other social ills that actually lead to communities and actually young people believing that they do not have a stake stake in this democracy, that this economy does not serve them.
Absolutely.
So those kind of attitudes are what creates this groundswell.
Do you agree, though, with the Prof that the issue of social compact, in a sense, is a non-starter?
Look, social compact, as the Prof makes it, makes sense and only work if all the parties are working towards it. You cannot be, you're extending a hand and someone is holding, is clenching a fist, expect that social compacts to work. Everyone has to go back. I think, as just saying, it talks to the failure of the whole rainbow nation that we talk about. Where we didn't actually deal with the issues. We just papered over them and were so quick to move forward. That is why 25, 26 years later, we're still dealing with the question of whether apartheid was a crime against humanity. Absolutely. It boggles the mind that you actually have those kind of attitudes still existing.
Well, look, last Thursday we had a State of the Nation address after much ado, but delivered nevertheless. This whole week, opposition parties have been responding, and the President responded today. Prof, your take, did the opposition parties, in a sense, have been able to isolate what are the big issues, right, in contrast to what the President tried to do last Thursday?
No, Judge, I don't think they, with respect, I don't think they do. I know we always complain about them, etc. But this discussion the three of us have been having over the last while or so, I didn't hear that in Parliament this week. You know, it was all about, it was all about fairly superficial things. Even when you get beyond this question of the gender-based violence and the apartheid, the crime against humanity, etc. I don't think we're actually getting to grips with the real issues, some of which we've been discussing here. I mean, you talk about the economy. You know, the real problem with the economy is what we call economic exclusion. It's the fact that millions of South Africans can't get in. If you are, and a colleague of mine at UJ has done work on this, if you are, let's be quite specific, you're a young black guy in a township who's had a good idea, you try and get that idea onto the market. It's not going to happen. And until we start dealing with issues like that, you know, Sbu was talking about the violence, etc. I mean, one of the factors in the violence is that you have people, and that's not the only factor. It's you know, there is a sense of despair and there is a sense of people are angry. But beyond that, there are people mobilizing violence because they want to get in on local government, and they want to get in on local government because that's your route into the middle class. And they're doing this because they can't get into the middle class through the normal route, which is that you get a qualification, you go out and you get a job, and then you do that. So in a sense, we are paying the price for our failure to deal with these issues, precisely in the kind of conflict we're seeing, and in some of the issues you were raising before the two of us got here.
Surely there must be a silver lining somewhere in the SONA and in the response of the opposition parties in terms of the issues that they are raising. I don't quite remember what Floyd themed his talk on, but he was raising, you know, certain practical things that could be done in the short term, right, as opposed to just having this long, you know, winded dreams of a smart city somewhere in the future, you know, where maybe there will be no taxis, there will be only flying objects or something, you know. Your take, there must be something. Please give me a hope somewhere that these guys talked about something important and then the President addressed it in his response today.
Look, JJ, I mean, unfortunately, the one thing, there are two issues actually, that which is why we're still debating it, that overshadowed this whole debate, this whole state of the nation, which is the issue of gender-based violence and also the issue of apartheid being a crime against humanity. But I think that there are still important things to take away. The President is still emphatic about the fact that actually that smart city will materialize the dreams of yellow plant and equipment out in Lanseria, but the reality is I still not know, and I still do not have an answer as to where that money will come from. But also he's still promising jobs. But if you notice that in this state of the nation, actually
there were no targets.
Yes.
He didn't commit to a number.
Exactly.
Yeah, but we still remember the previous number of 2 million jobs in 10 years.
Exactly. So the fact that he's not promising, he's not giving you any number, of course it should not give us false hope.
Yeah.
The fact that he's not promising anything, coming from those from that high horse of telling us that he'll create 1 million jobs to a point where he doesn't even mention a number, tells you that actually we're in dire straits.
Yeah,
so
maybe it's learning from Zuma, because Zuma, promised 1 million jobs or 5 million jobs in his first SONA. And then the next SONA, he redefined what that means. Called it job opportunities. Oh, what the hell? You see, this is the problem. That now they just don't know now what to do anymore. And, Prof, this could mean the drying up of ideas about how to tackle the crisis that's facing us. And everybody understands that there's a crisis. It doesn't matter from what angle you're looking at it. How many times have our growth targets been revised by the IMF, now by the rating agencies, and then by ourselves?
Yeah, because, you see, the jobs issue that we're talking about at the moment, I think the fact that we are talking about jobs in the way we're talking about jobs indicates that the message still hasn't got through. And the message which has not got through, is that all this talk about this one's going to create 5 million and that one's going to create 8 million, is based on the fantasy that one day we're all going to wake up and every South African is going to live the way white people lived under apartheid. They're all going to go to work every morning in a nice shop. And that's a fantasy. It's a fantasy in every country in the world. We're not an exception to the rest of the universe. So what we need to be talking about is, what do we do? Because that's the reality. What do we do about the millions of South Africans who are not going to be in a job in a factory or a shop or an office? Now, the good news is, you wanted good news, the good news is there are lots of things we can do. If we stop talking about jobs in the sense that you go and work for an employer, and we start talking about livelihoods, which is how you put bread on the table for yourself and your family and contribute to the economy, then there's an awful lot we can do.
All right.
But as long as we're not talking about that, we can't do anything.
All right. I want us to focus on that. What needs to be done, right? And now that it's a week later after the SONA, do you think that in all the conversations of, not just in Parliament, but in newspaper commentaries, in interviews like this in the last week, are there 2 or 3 things we can take away that maybe as government goes back to the drawing board, and next week all the ministers will be giving us details, and some of them have already started even in this debate, that they should take note? Because part of the trouble we have is that there seems not to be a repository of ideas, or at least a welcoming of ideas by government to harness, because there are so many people with ideas